I'm Dr. Jennifer Bird. I'm a biblical scholar, and I'm doing these videos talking about some of the stories and parables related to Jesus and finances because I think it's really interesting. It dramatically changed the way I think about the Gospels themselves, and it was not something that I heard, whether or not it was someone tried to show me. I didn't hear it growing up, right? So I find bringing in a political and economic lens to trying to understand, in particular, what got Jesus to Jerusalem to begin with, and then some of these stories and these exchanges that go on for him in Jerusalem. They make so much more sense when I read them through an economic lens, and when I read them through the lens of knowing, which I didn't know growing up, knowing that the Romans had essentially put the collection of taxes on as a burden to the Jews themselves. The Jewish leaders in the temple were asked to do that collection, and so you've got a collection of taxes associated with the temple. Taxes to Caesar associated with the temple. Think about that. There are some stories that you might think of differently now if you know that that's what's going on. Last week, I left off with reading about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem and how the Pharisees said to tell people to be quiet. Don't draw attention to yourselves, right? The Roman soldiers are going to come over here and squelch you or draw attention to us in a negative way, however you want to read that, but read it through this lens of this isn't about Jesus dying for sins. It's nothing like that. This is about Jesus being really pissed about the way the people are being exploited by their own leadership. And when Jews exploit one another, that is a breaking of covenant. That's a breaking of the covenant relationship that they're supposed to be committed to. So it is a way of saying Jesus wants some reform within the leadership because they're not living up to what they're supposed to be living up to. We get what was one of the most transformative things for me in looking at this whole story. So we had the story of Zacchaeus. He comes into Jerusalem. Who lives in Jericho. He comes into Jerusalem. Got these stories about terrible managers, cruel people, which are critiques of the way people run businesses or the way they exploit. These stories are not necessarily positive stories of examples to emulate. He is often, at this point, now that he's down in Jerusalem, he's telling stories about people like the men in the temple who collect taxes, and when you can't pay your taxes, what do? You hand over the deed to your land. And what does that lead to? That leads to all kinds of other kinds of chaos up there. So I read about him entering Jerusalem last time, and how the Pharisees are saying, keep a lid on it. He said, no, if I tell them to be quiet, even the injustice is too great. And then we get the next, I'm going to skip over a couple verses. And then he entered the temple and began to drive out those who were selling things there. And I love this because I see people talking about this, and I think they often misunderstand kind of the depth of the critique here. It's not just that people are selling things there, right? He says, my house should be a house of prayer, end quote. And Jesus says, but you have made it a den of robbers. What happens in a den of robbers? A den of robbers is where robbers are safe. It is where they collect their loot. It is where they plan, where they scheme. It is where they are safe. Jesus isn't just critiquing that they have a high interest rate in the exchange between whatever. He's not just complaining because people are charging too much for doves. He's angry about what's going down in the temple area, the whole thing related to the temple. Instead of it being the center of the temple of covenant relationship with God, the center of exploitation of the masses. That's what he's talking about. That's what he's angry about. Take this to the place of economics and politics. I think it actually makes so much more sense when you can go there instead of making it about some sort of religious only issue. What's deeply important to me to understand in the first century context, religiosity, being a good Jew is absolutely connected to taking care of each other. And so any king or priest, any leader who has exploited their position of power instead of taking care of the people under their power, that is a form of not being a good Jew. Like, that is breaking covenant. And this is a piece of what's going on in these Gospels that I did not understand growing up, and I think is helpful to try to help others understand. Maybe you already had that. I hope that was helpful. See you next time.